My name is Irene, and I am 54 years old. I spent my entire life believing that a mother's love could conquer anything. I raised my daughter alone after my husband passed away. I worked double shifts so she could become a lawyer. Then one evening she called me, not to invite me to her wedding, but to tell me I was not welcome. She said the best wedding gift I could give would be to disappear from their lives permanently. I left, but before I walked away, I did something no one knew about. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below with your location. And if you have ever been pushed away by someone you love, unconditionally hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. What I secretly did before leaving will stay with you long after this story ends. My story begins in a small house on the outskirts of Detroit, Michigan. It was nothing fancy. Just a 2-bedroom home with a leaky roof and a backyard big enough for a swing set. But inside those walls, there was more love than any mansion could ever hold. I married Douglas when I was 24 years old. He was a mechanic at a local auto shop, strong hands, gentle heart, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. I was a newly graduated nurse, eager to help people and build a life with the man I loved. We did not have much money, but we had each other. And back then, that felt like everything. Kristen came into our lives 2 years later. I remember the moment the doctor placed her in my arms. She was so small, so perfect. Douglas stood beside me, tears streaming down his face. He whispered that she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. From that day forward, our entire world revolved around that little girl. Douglas was the kind of father every child deserves. He taught Kristen how to ride a bicycle in our driveway. He read her bedtime stories every single night, even when he came home exhausted from work. On Sunday mornings, he would wake up early to make pancakes shaped like animals. Kristen would giggle and try to guess what each one was supposed to be. Those were the golden years. Simple, ordinary, and absolutely precious. We had traditions that made our little family feel complete. Every summer we would go camping at a state park about 3 hours north. Douglas would set up the tent while Kristen and I gathered sticks for the campfire. We would roast marshmallows and tell silly ghost stories until Kristen fell asleep in her father's arms. Those memories are burned into my heart. I can still smell the pine trees. I can still hear her laughter echoing through the woods. Then everything changed. It happened when Kristen was 20 years old. She was in her second year of college, studying hard to get into law school. Douglas had been coughing for months, but he kept saying it was nothing. Just allergies, he would tell me. Just the changing seasons. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I could not imagine a world without him in it. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday afternoon. Stage 4 lung cancer. The doctor said it had already spread. There was nothing they could do except make him comfortable. I remember standing in that hospital hallway, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Kristen was home for the weekend. I had to tell her that her father was dying. The next 18 months were the hardest of my life. I continued working as a nurse during the day and came home to care for Douglas at night. Kristen wanted to drop out of school to help, but Douglas refused. He made her promise to finish her degree. He said her education was the most important thing. He said he would be watching over her from wherever he ended up. Douglas passed away on a rainy Thursday morning in October. Kristen was 22 years old. I held his hand as he took his last breath. His final words were about our daughter. He told me to take care of her. He told me to make sure she knew how proud he was. He told me to use the life insurance money for her future. After the funeral, I opened the envelope from the insurance company, $150,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life, but I made a decision that day. I would not touch a single penny of it. That money belonged to Kristin. It was Douglas's final gift to his daughter, and I would protect it until the right moment. Instead, I found another way to pay for her law school. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital. When that was not enough, I took a second job at a nursing home 3 nights a week. I would finish my hospital shift at 7 in the evening, drive across town, and work until 2 in the morning. Then I would sleep for a few hours and do it all over again. Kristin did not know about the second job. I never told her. She was grieving her father and trying to focus on her studies. I did not want her to worry about money. I did not want her to feel guilty. So I kept it to myself. I wore concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I smiled and told her everything was fine. When Kristin graduated from law school, I sat in the audience and cried, not just because I was proud, though I was, but because Douglas was not there to see it. I looked at the empty seat beside me and imagined him cheering louder than anyone else in the room. Our daughter had done it. She was going to be a lawyer. All those sleepless nights had been worth it. She got a job at a prestigious law firm in Chicago shortly after graduation. I was thrilled for her, even though it meant she would be living 4 hours away. I told myself that this was what parents do. We raise our children to fly and then we let them go. I never expected that letting go would eventually mean losing her completely. The first time I met Victor was about 6 months after Kristin started working at the firm. She called me one evening, her voice bubbling with excitement. She said she had met someone special, a fellow lawyer 3 years older than her, smart, ambitious, from a good family. I could hear the happiness in her voice, and it made my heart sing. She brought him home for Thanksgiving that year. I spent 3 days preparing the meal. I wanted everything to be perfect. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I bought new tablecloths and candles. I even splurged on a nice bottle of wine, something I rarely did. Victor arrived in a luxury car that probably cost more than my house. He was tall, well-dressed, and spoke with the kind of confidence that comes from growing up with privilege. He shook my hand politely and complimented the house, though I caught his eyes scanning the small rooms with something that looked like surprise, or maybe disappointment. Dinner went well enough on the surface. Victor asked about my work as a nurse. He seemed interested, or at least he pretended to be, but there was a distance in his manner that I could not quite explain. He looked at me the way someone might look at a museum exhibit, curious but detached, like I was something to be observed rather than someone to connect with. When they left, Kristin hugged me and thanked me for a wonderful meal. Victor shook my hand again and said it was nice to meet me, but he did not look me in the eyes. And as I watched their car disappear down the street, I felt a small knot forming in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that first meetings are always awkward. I had no idea that this was just the beginning. A few months later, Kristin invited me to dinner at Victor's parents' house. She said they wanted to meet me properly. I was nervous but hopeful. Maybe this would be my chance to make a good impression. Maybe I could show them that despite my simple life, I had raised a remarkable daughter. The house was not a house. It was a mansion, iron gates, a circular driveway, columns at the entrance. I felt like I was walking into a movie set. Kristin met me at the door and squeezed my hand. She told me not to be nervous. She said Victor's parents were excited to meet me. Evelyn greeted me in the foyer. She was elegant in a way that made me immediately conscious of my discount store dress and drugstore makeup. Her handshake was brief, her smile practiced. She looked me up and down in a single glance that felt like an assessment. I apparently did not pass. Arthur barely acknowledged me at all. He shook my hand without making eye contact and immediately turned to talk to Victor about some business deal. I stood there feeling invisible while Kristin made small talk with Evelyn about wedding venues. Wedding venues. They were already discussing venues, and I was just hearing about it now. At dinner, Evelyn asked me questions about my nursing career, but the way she asked them made me feel small. She would nod slowly at my answers, then change the subject to something more impressive. A charity gala she was organising, a vacation home they had just purchased in Aspen, the private school where Victor had been valedictorian. The worst moment came when she asked about my house. I told her it was small, but comfortable. She smiled that thin smile and said, "That must be nice for someone in my situation." I did not know what she meant by my situation, but I felt the sting of it. Kristin said nothing. She just kept eating her salad like she had not heard anything. On the drive home, I replayed the evening in my head. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Rich people have different manners, I told myself. They do not mean to be condescending, but deep down, I knew something had shifted. I just did not want to admit it yet. Over the next year, I noticed Kristin changing. Small things at first. She started commenting on my clothes. She suggested I might want to update my wardrobe, maybe get a more modern haircut. She sent me articles about fashion for women over 50. I tried not to take it personally. I thought she was just trying to help. Then she stopped coming home for visits. There was always an excuse. Work was too busy. Victor had a conference. Evelyn was throwing a party they could not miss. I would invite her for Sunday dinners, and she would promise to come, then cancel at the last minute. I started seeing pictures on social media of her having dinner at Evelyn's house on the same days she told me she was too tired to drive. One afternoon, I stopped by her apartment unannounced. I was in Chicago for a nursing conference and thought I would surprise her. When she opened the door, her face went pale, not happy surprised, nervous surprised. She invited me in, but the apartment felt different. There were photos of her and Victor everywhere, a few of her with Evelyn and Arthur. Not a single picture of me, not a single picture of Douglas. While she made tea, I overheard her on the phone with someone. She did not know I could hear. She said her mother had just shown up uninvited. She called our family home too small and too far away. She laughed at something the other person said. It was a laugh I did not recognize, hollow and performative. I pretended I had not heard anything. I drank my tea and asked about the wedding plans. She said Evelyn was handling everything because she had experience with high society events. I asked if there was anything I could help with. She said she would let me know, but never did. Weeks passed with no information about the wedding. I tried calling, but Kristin rarely picked up. When she did, the conversations were short and superficial. I felt like I was talking to a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The warmth that used to fill her voice was gone, replaced by something cold and distant. The phone call came on a September evening. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital. My feet ached, my back was sore. I was looking forward to a hot bath and an early bedtime. When I saw Kristin's name on the screen, my heart lifted. Maybe she was finally calling to talk about the wedding. Maybe she needed her mother after all. Her voice was flat when I answered. No greeting, no small talk. She said she needed to tell me something and asked me to listen without interrupting. I said okay, even though my stomach was already churning with dread. She told me the wedding was happening in November, a beautiful venue in Chicago. 300 guests, everything paid for by Victor's parents. I waited for her to tell me my role, mother of the bride, a seat at the head table, a dance together at the reception. Instead, she told me I was not on the guest list. I thought I had misheard her. I asked her to repeat what she said. She did slower this time, like she was explaining something simple to a child. I was not invited to her wedding. Evelyn and she had discussed it. My presence would not be appropriate given the caliber of guests attending. It would make things awkward. My hands started shaking. I asked her how she could say this to me. I was her mother. I had raised her. I had sacrificed everything so she could have a future. Did none of that matter anymore? She sighed like I was being dramatic. She said I always did this. I always brought up my sacrifices to make her feel guilty. She said she was tired of feeling like she owed me something. She said that if I really loved her, I would want what was best for her. I asked her what about what was best for me? What about my right to see my only child get married? What about everything we had been through together? Then she said the words that shattered me. She said the best wedding gift I could give them would be to disappear from their lives permanently. She said I was an embarrassment. She said Evelyn had shown her that people like us only hold people like her back. She said she had outgrown me. I could not speak. I could not breathe. The phone felt like a brick in my hand. 28 years of motherhood condensed into one brutal rejection. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to ask who had poisoned my daughter's mind. But I did none of those things. I simply asked if this was really what she wanted. She said yes. Then she told me not to call her anymore. Victor agreed that a clean break would be best for everyone. She hung up. I sat on my couch for hours without moving. The room grew dark around me. I stared at the photographs on the wall. Kristin as a baby, Kristin on her first day of school, Kristin in her graduation cap, Douglas holding her on his shoulders. All those moments of pure joy now felt like relics from someone else's life. Around midnight, I called Charlotte. My older sister had always been my rock. She lived in Wisconsin with her husband and son. We did not talk as often as we should, but she was the only person I could think of calling. Charlotte answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. When I told her what happened, she woke up instantly. I heard her gasp. Then I heard her anger. She wanted to call Kristin right then and give her a piece of her mind. She said our parents would be rolling in their graves. I begged her not to interfere. I said it would only make things worse. If Kristin wanted to cut me out of her life, then maybe that was her choice to make. Maybe I had to accept it. Charlotte disagreed. She said I was too good, too forgiving. She said Kristin needed to be held accountable, but she promised to respect my wishes. For now. After we hung up, I went to my bedroom. I could not sleep, so I just lay there in the darkness. I thought about Douglas. I wondered what he would do if he was still alive. Would he fight for our daughter? Would he confront the people who had turned her against us? Or would he understand that sometimes love means letting go even when it breaks you? When dawn finally came, I had made a decision. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would not give Evelyn or Victor the satisfaction of seeing me crawl. But I would not simply disappear either. I was going to do something for my daughter one last time, something she would not know about until after the wedding, something that would prove my love was unconditional even if hers was not. The next morning I made a phone call that would change everything. Not the call to Kristin. She had made it clear she did not want to hear from me. Instead, I called a real estate agent named Paul who had helped a co-worker find a house the year before. I told him I was looking for something specific, a modest 2-bedroom home in a safe neighborhood, not too far from downtown Chicago where Kristin worked, something clean and well-maintained with a small yard, a place that could be a sanctuary. Paul asked if I was planning to move to Chicago. I told him no, the house was not for me. It was a gift for someone who did not know she was receiving it yet. Over the next 2 weeks, Paul sent me listings. I reviewed them during my lunch breaks, and after my shifts ended, I visited 3 properties on a weekend. When I told my co-workers I was visiting an old friend, the third house was perfect, a little cottage with blue shutters and a white picket fence, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, a kitchen with a window overlooking a garden. It was 20 minutes from Kristin's office, close enough to be convenient, far enough to feel like an escape. The asking price was $145,000. I had not touched the insurance money since Douglas passed away 8 years ago. It had been sitting in a separate account collecting interest, waiting for the right purpose. Now I knew what that purpose was. I put in an offer. The sellers accepted within a day. I paid in full, no mortgage, no loan, just a cashier's check and a prayer that someday my daughter would understand why I did this. The next step was more complicated. I needed to transfer the deed to Kristin's name without her knowing about it. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in property transfers. He was an older gentleman named George who reminded me a little of Douglas. Kind eyes, patient demeanor. He did not judge me when I explained the situation. He simply helped me draft the paperwork. The deed would be held in trust and delivered to Kristin after her wedding. I gave George specific instructions. He was to wait exactly 1 week after the wedding date, then send the documents to Kristin's office address, along with a letter from me. The letter was the hardest part. I spent 5 nights writing it. I would start, then crumple up the paper and throw it away. Nothing felt adequate. How do you summarize a lifetime of love on a few pages? How do you explain to your daughter that you are giving her everything without expecting anything in return? In the end, I decided to tell the truth. I wrote about Douglas, about how much he loved her, about his final words, asking me to take care of her and make sure she knew he was proud. I wrote about the life insurance money I had never touched, because I always knew it was meant for her. I wrote about the nights I worked double shifts without telling her, about the second job at the nursing home that I kept secret for years, about the times I went without new clothes or vacations so she could have everything she needed for law school. I did not write these things to make her feel guilty. I wrote them because she deserved to know the truth. At the end of the letter, I wrote something that came from the deepest part of my heart. I told her that this house was what her father always wanted to give her, a place of her own, a foundation for her future. I told her that I was simply finishing what Douglas started. I told her that no matter what happened between us, no matter what she chose to believe about me, I would always be her mother. And a mother's love does not come with conditions. I signed the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and gave it to George along with the deed documents. He promised to guard them carefully. He told me I was doing a remarkable thing. I told him I was just doing what any mother would do. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur. I went to work. I came home. I ate meals I did not taste. I watched television shows I did not remember. Maggie, my closest friend at the hospital, noticed something was wrong. She cornered me in the break room one afternoon and refused to let me leave until I told her what was happening. When I finished explaining, she had tears in her eyes. She asked how I could still give Kristin the house after what she had done. She said I was either the most selfless person she knew or the most foolish. I told her maybe I was both. But I also told her something I had realized during those long, sleepless nights. My love for Kristin was not dependent on her loving me back. It existed on its own, pure and unconditional. She could reject me 1,000 times, and I would still want good things for her. That was what being a mother meant to me. November 15th arrived, the wedding day. I knew the ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. I had seen the details posted on social media by one of Evelyn's friends. A grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra. I stayed home. Maggie came over with takeout food and old movies. She said she was not going to let me sit alone on such a difficult day. Father Thomas from my church stopped by in the evening to pray with me. He held my hands and asked God to give me strength. He reminded me that grace was not about getting what we deserve, but about giving what we can. That night, I slept holding a photograph of Douglas. I whispered to him in the darkness. I told him I had kept my promise. I had taken care of our daughter, even when she did not want me to. I hoped he was proud of me. I hoped he could see that our love for Kristin was bigger than any pain she could cause. 2 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang while I was preparing breakfast. The caller ID showed Charlotte's name. I assumed she was checking in on me, as she had been doing almost daily since the wedding passed. But her voice was different this time, urgent and trembling. She told me to sit down. I said I was fine standing. She insisted. So I sat at my kitchen table, my coffee growing cold, and listened as my sister unravelled a truth I never expected. Charlotte had a friend named Barbara who worked at an event planning company in Chicago, the same company that Evelyn used for all her social gatherings. Barbara had mentioned something to Charlotte in passing the week before, something that did not make sense. Barbara said that when she was coordinating details for Kristin's wedding, Evelyn had told the staff that the bride's mother was deceased. She said it with such casual certainty that no one questioned it. The guest list was arranged accordingly. The seating chart was designed without any consideration for maternal family members from the bride's side. Charlotte confronted Barbara, asking if she was sure. Barbara was certain. Evelyn had specifically said that Kristin's mother passed away several years ago and that it was a sensitive topic not to be discussed. I felt the blood drain from my face. Evelyn had told people I was dead. She had erased me completely, not just from the guest list, but from Kristin's entire narrative. It was not just exclusion, it was elimination. Charlotte told me she could not stay silent anymore. She said she was going to call Kristin and tell her everything. I started to protest to remind her of my wishes, but she cut me off. She said enough was enough. She said Kristin deserved to know the truth about what Evelyn had been doing. I asked her to wait. Just a few more days. Let the honeymoon end. Let things settle. Then we could figure out the best way to approach this. But Charlotte had already made up her mind. She said she was calling Kristin that afternoon, and nothing I said would stop her. 3 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I did not recognize. A Chicago area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. The voice on the other end was professional and calm. He introduced himself as George the lawyer who was holding the deed and my letter. He said he had received an urgent request from Kristin's office. She had somehow learned about the documents before the scheduled delivery date. She was demanding to receive them immediately. I asked how she found out. George was not sure, but he suspected someone at his firm might have mentioned it inadvertently. He apologized for the breach in confidentiality, but the real question was whether I wanted him to proceed with the delivery now or wait as originally planned. I told him to send everything right away. If Kristin already knew, there was no point in delaying. 2 days later, I received a text message from Charlotte. Just 2 words. She knows. Then nothing. Silence for an entire week. I did not know what Kristin was thinking or feeling. I did not know if she had read the letter or thrown it away unopened. I went to work every day with my phone in my pocket, checking it, constantly jumping at every notification. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday evening, my phone rang. The screen displayed a name I had not seen in months. Kristin. I stared at it for 3 rings, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I answered. There was silence on the other end, then a sound I knew better than any other sound in the world. My daughter crying. She said one word, just one. Mum. Kristin's voice was broken, barely recognizable through the sobs. She kept trying to form sentences, but they came out in fragments. Pieces of apology scattered between gasps for air. I held the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. I did not interrupt. I just listened. Between the tears, the story emerged. Charlotte had called her 3 days after the honeymoon ended. She had not held back. She told Kristin about the double shifts I worked for years, about the nursing home job I kept secret, about the life insurance money I never touched, about Barbara and what Evelyn had told the wedding staff. Kristin said she did not believe it at first. She thought Charlotte was exaggerating, trying to manipulate her into feeling guilty. So she confronted Evelyn directly. She asked her mother-in-law point blank whether she had told people that Kristin's mother was dead. Evelyn denied it. She said Barbara must have misunderstood. She said Charlotte was jealous of their relationship and trying to cause problems. For a moment, Kristin almost believed her. Then the documents arrived from George's office. Kristin read my letter 4 times before she could process what it said. She saw the deed to the house with her name on it. She calculated the amount I must have spent. She realized that the money came from her father's life insurance, the money I had protected for 8 years while working myself to exhaustion. Everything Evelyn had told her suddenly looked different. All those comments about my small house, my simple job, my lack of sophistication, all those subtle suggestions that I was holding Kristin back, that she had outgrown her origins, that people like us did not belong in their world. Kristin confronted Evelyn again. this time with evidence, this time without giving her a chance to spin the narrative. Evelyn finally admitted the truth. Yes, she had told people I was dead. She said it was for Kristin's own good. She said my presence would have been an embarrassment. She said she was trying to protect the family image. Kristin asked what gave Evelyn the right to erase her mother. Evelyn said she was just doing what any mother would do. That was when something snapped inside my daughter. She told Evelyn that she was not her mother. She said a real mother does not lie. A real mother does not manipulate. A real mother does not spend years poisoning a daughter against the woman who gave her life. Victor tried to intervene. He told Kristin she was being emotional and needed to calm down. Kristin turned to him and asked whose side he was on. He hesitated. In that hesitation, Kristin saw everything she needed to see. She left Evelyn's house that night and checked into a hotel. She spent 3 days alone reading my letter over and over, looking at old photographs she had stored on her phone, photographs she had stopped displaying, photographs of me and her, of Douglas holding her as a baby. By the time she called me, she had already made several decisions. She would establish clear boundaries with Evelyn. She would demand that Victor choose between his mother's manipulation and his wife's well-being, and she would apologize to me, not just with words, but with actions. I listened to all of this without saying anything. When she finally stopped talking, exhausted and hoarse, I asked her one question. Did she mean what she said that night in September? Did she really want me to disappear from her life permanently? She broke down again. She said no, 1,000 times no. She said she did not know who she was when she said those words. She said Evelyn had spent 2 years slowly reshaping her thoughts, making her see me through a distorted lens. She said she was so desperate to fit into Victor's world that she forgot where she came from. I told her I was not angry. I told her I understood how easy it is to lose yourself when you want something badly enough. I told her the only thing that mattered now was what happened next. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I told her I already had. The moment she said my name on the phone, the forgiveness was complete. But I also told her something important. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. Trust had to be rebuilt. Our relationship had to grow again from new soil. She said she understood. She said she would do whatever it took. I invited her to come home, not to Chicago, home, to the small house with the leaky roof and the backyard swing set, the place where she learned to walk, where Douglas taught her to ride a bicycle, where we used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. She said she would be there by the end of the week. Kristin arrived on a Friday afternoon. I watched her car pull into the driveway from the living room window. She sat behind the wheel for several minutes before getting out. I did not rush her. Some moments need space to breathe. When she finally walked up to the front door, I opened it before she could knock. We stood there looking at each other, mother and daughter, strangers and family. Then she stepped forward and fell into my arms. We held each other for a long time. I felt her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I stroked her hair the way I used to when she was small and had nightmares. I whispered that everything would be okay. I did not know if that was true, but it felt like the right thing to say. Inside, I made tea. It was such a simple act, but it felt significant somehow. We sat at the same kitchen table where I had received her devastating phone call months earlier. Now, here we were, trying to find our way back to each other. She looked around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. Her eyes lingered on the photographs still hanging on every wall. Her graduation picture, her baby pictures, the family portrait we took the year before Douglas got sick. She said she had forgotten how many memories were in this house. She said she had tried to convince herself that her past did not matter, that she could reinvent herself as someone new. But sitting here now, she realized she could never outrun who she really was. We talked for hours. She told me things she had never told anyone, how intimidated she felt the first time she visited Victor's parents, How Evelyn made her feel ashamed of her background without ever saying anything explicitly cruel. How the comments about my house, my clothes, my job accumulated over time until she started believing them herself. She told me how lonely she had been trying to become someone she was not, how she would lie awake at night, feeling hollow, even when Victor was sleeping right beside her, how she missed me every single day, but convinced herself that missing me was a weakness she had to overcome. I listened without judgment. I did not need to tell her she was wrong. She already knew. What she needed was for someone to hear her, truly hear her, and still love her, despite everything. When it got dark outside, I suggested she stay the night. She hesitated at first, thinking about Victor, about work, about all the obligations waiting for her back in Chicago. Then she looked at me and said yes. One night, maybe more. She slept in her old bedroom. I had not changed anything since she moved out. The same purple comforter, the same posters on the wall, the same desk where she studied for her law school exams. She stood in the doorway staring at it all, and I saw something shift in her expression, like she was finally coming home. A week later, Victor came to see me. He stood on my porch looking uncomfortable and out of place. His expensive suit seemed absurd against the backdrop of my modest neighborhood. He asked if we could talk. I invited him in. He apologized. He said he should have stood up to his mother from the beginning. He said he let her control the narrative because it was easier than fighting. He admitted that he had been a coward. I appreciated his honesty. I told him that apologies were a good start, but that actions mattered more than words. I told him that if he truly loved my daughter, he needed to protect her from anyone who tried to diminish her, including his own family. He nodded slowly. He said he was already working on it. He had told his mother that their relationship would have boundaries moving forward. He had made it clear that any disrespect toward me or my family would not be tolerated. Evelyn was not happy about it, but Victor said he did not care anymore. Before he left, he said something that surprised me. He told me he understood now why Kristen loved me so much. He said I was the kind of mother he wished he had. I watched him drive away, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone clinging to illusions, but the quiet hope of someone who has walked through fire and found something worth saving on the other side. The months that followed were not perfect. Healing never is. There were awkward moments and difficult conversations. There were times when old wounds reopened and we had to dress them all over again. But there were also good moments. Beautiful moments. Kristen started visiting every other weekend. Sometimes Victor came with her. Sometimes she came alone. We would cook together in my small kitchen, trying out recipes from Douglas's mother that I had not made in years. We would sit on the back porch and watch the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. She started using the house I bought her as a weekend retreat, a place to escape the chaos of Chicago. A place where she could remember who she was before everything got complicated. She painted the kitchen yellow because it reminded her of sunshine. She planted tomatoes in the garden because Douglas used to grow them in our backyard. My relationship with Charlotte grew stronger too. We started having weekly phone calls that lasted for hours. Her son Derek reconnected with Kristen, and the two of them became close friends. It felt like our family was rebuilding itself piece by piece. At work, Maggie threw a small party in the break room. She said it was to celebrate my birthday, but I knew it was really to celebrate everything I had been through. Father Thomas came by afterward with flowers and a prayer. He said he had never doubted that things would work out. I told him I wished I had his faith. Slowly, I started doing things for myself again. I joined a yoga class at the community center. I volunteered at the church food bank on weekends. I even went on a short trip to Wisconsin to visit Charlotte and meet her new puppy. Small steps toward a life that was about more than just waiting for someone else to need me. The hardest lesson was learning that my worth was not determined by my relationship with my daughter. For years, being Kristen's mother had been my primary identity. When she rejected me, I felt like I had ceased to exist. But surviving that rejection taught me something important. I was a whole person on my own. My value did not depend on anyone else's approval. That did not mean I loved Kristin any less. If anything, I loved her more freely now, without desperation, without the fear of losing her. I could be her mother without being consumed by the role. Evelyn never apologized to me directly. Kristin said she probably never would. Some people cannot admit they were wrong even when the evidence is undeniable. I decided not to let that bother me. My peace was not contingent on Evelyn's remorse. What mattered was that Kristin had seen the truth. She had chosen to build a bridge back to me instead of burning it completely, and she had done the hardest thing anyone can do. She had looked at herself honestly and decided to change. A year after the wedding, on a spring afternoon, when the cherry blossoms were blooming in my backyard, Kristin called me with news. She was pregnant. I sat down on the porch steps, overwhelmed by emotion. She laughed and cried on the other end of the line, saying she wanted me to be there for everything: the doctor appointments, the nursery planning, the delivery. I asked her if she was sure. After everything that had happened, she could have kept me at a distance. She could have protected herself from the vulnerability of letting me in again. She said that was exactly why she wanted me close, because I had proven that my love was unconditional, because I had given her everything without asking for anything in return, because she wanted her child to know the grandmother who loved without limits. The baby arrived 7 months later, a girl. They named her June after Douglas's mother. I was in the delivery room when she was born, holding Kristin's hand while she pushed. The moment I held my granddaughter for the first time, I understood why I had survived all the pain. This tiny, perfect creature. This new beginning. Kristin looked at me, holding June, tears streaming down her face. She whispered that she was sorry it took so long for her to come back. She said she wasted so much time. I told her something I had learned in the past year, something that felt truer than anything else I knew. There is no such thing as wasted time when the ending is right. Every detour we take, every mistake we make, leads us somewhere. Sometimes it leads us home. If you have made it this far in my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been excluded by someone you love? Have you ever felt erased or forgotten by the people who should cherish you most? Tell me your story in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our pain is the first step toward healing it. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. It helps more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories about love, forgiveness, and the complicated bonds of family, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe a friend going through a difficult time with their children. Maybe a parent who feels invisible. You never know whose day you might brighten by passing this along. Thank you for spending this time with me. Whatever you are facing right now, I hope you remember this. Your worth is not determined by how others treat you. Your love is not diminished by rejection, and it is never too late to start again. Be kind to yourselves and be kind to each other until next time.